Hey, how's it going, everybody? Welcome to Animal Activism Collective's channel. My name is Trey. My dog's already barking in the background, so I can tell it's going to be a great live stream. I'm so excited to be joined by Tyler and Susie of CAFT. It's been an amazing, I would say, quarter or like end of the year for animal rights activism, especially the anti-fur work that CAFT and others are doing. And yeah, I'm pleased to be joined by both of them right now. So yeah, how's it going, guys?
How's it going, Trey?
Hey, thanks for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got Susie, the executive director of CAFT here, and Tyler, the co-founder and campaigns director. And I want to get into the New York Fashion Week campaign. It was a very quick campaign, really fast, not unusual for a CAFT campaign these days, I think. But I want to ask you all about that. But I want to back up for a second, and before we really dive into it, actually, I want to ask if Susie, you could just give us a little bit about CAFT's mission and what CAFT is just all about.
Yeah, definitely. So CAFT was founded in 2020 by Tyler, and we run pressure campaigns against designers and companies that still promote fur. Our mission is to end the fur industry. And we run decentralized pressure campaigns. So that means that, anyone, anywhere can get involved in our campaigns. They don't need to ask permission. They can organize a protest. We have activists in over like 50 different cities. Lots of participation internationally. And to date, we have won 17 campaigns as of today.
17. Oh my goodness. that is incredible. I remember I think it was back in 2020 when I first learned about CAFT and met Tyler and all that stuff. I mean, when I think I've said this on other live streams, but I know when the Saks Fifth Avenue campaign was going on, we're like, oh, we're probably going to be on this for like 5 years. And here we are 5 years later with 17 wins over. And I'm sure that's like even more brands under that 17 wins. So with all that said, I mean, CAFT is very strategic about how you select targets, who you're deciding to go after, what tactics you use. And I'd love to ask whichever one of you want to answer why New York Fashion Week was on your radar, and why did you ultimately decide that they were an important target and that's who you wanted to go after next?
Yeah, of course. The biggest reason why we went after New York Fashion Week really is because of how much influence the fashion shows have on the fashion industry. And because there are so few designers that are left that are still selling fur, like the very few that are left tend to be very difficult. So like, for instance, when CAFT first started, there was a ton of brands to pick from. The first designer we ever went after was Monique Lahoulier, who was a smaller designer that specialized in bridal that was based out of Los Angeles. And then we moved on to a little bit bigger designer that was Allison Olivia. And pretty quickly, we're going after the big department stores like Saks Fifth Avenue and Neiman Marcus. But you fast forward 5 years, and the designers that are left that are still selling fur are far and few between. And more importantly, one of the big things that CAFT is always trying to look at whenever we're looking at a new target is the cultural influence that that target is going to have on the fashion industry. Because like what we're really trying to do, like as Susie said earlier, is like our stated mission is to abolish the fur trade. And if we just went after a small like mom and pop shop that has fur, yeah, sure, maybe we would beat them. But like in the grand scheme of like beating the fur industry, that isn't like a huge ticket item for moving us closer to that goal. And as we've gotten more and more wins, the designers that are left are really difficult, especially like the big ones that still have fur. Namely like the brands under LVMH, like brands like Fendi, that their heritage, is very centered around fur. They have a slogan that says "Fur is Fendi and Fendi is fur." These brands, they strongly identify with fur. So for us to go to them and ask them, hey, like, give us a fur-free policy, which we have been doing for quite a few years now, they're very resistant. So that's one of the reasons why we kind of shifted our direction a little bit momentarily on going after things like Vogue magazine and then New York Fashion Week, because those institutions are just so important for the fashion industry, and like in terms of like setting like the trends and like what's popular. Like it's marketing for them. So like for us, like that was the biggest deciding factor, was like New York Fashion Week. Like that is the place where these designers are going to showcase their products, and that's where they're like setting the trends on like future collections. And we want to make damn sure that none of them have fur in them. So that was a big reason why.
Awesome. So yeah, I guess you're saying sort of like with the Vogue magazine win, while they're not directly selling fur, it kind of puts a stranglehold on who can promote what, and that sort of, I guess, the same strategy behind the New York Fashion Week. It's different than a magazine, I guess, but it's on the runway. It's a different way to promote this vile industry.
Yeah. I do want to add also, New York Fashion Week is one of the big 4 fashion weeks. So you have New York City, London, Milan, and Paris. London has already gone for free. So, we were thinking, we always had New York Fashion Week sort of like in the back of our mind. Like Tyler said, it's where trends are born. They show collections twice a year, during fall, during spring. And a lot of celebrities go to these shows. They sit front row, essentially. This is where they shop. There was also numerous designers who were regulars on New York Fashion Week, like Laquan Smith, Romeo Hunt, Dennis Basso. These designers had sponsorships or partnerships with Saga Furs. So it's pretty significant that they won't be allowed to show those pieces anymore.
Yeah, I think that's a great strategy. And Susie, you mentioned London. I know that I'm going to get into more about like the actions that happened leading up to this win. But since you mentioned London, I know that there were protests both in New York and London. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yes. There's an amazing group in London called FFR UK. And so they started going after William Morris Endeavor, who helps New York Fashion Week. They own the trademark for New York Fashion Week. They help produce the shows. And as of late, they were mostly involved in like procuring brands and like brand sponsorships for New York Fashion Week. So yeah, our friends in London started protesting William Morris Endeavor. They occupied the lobby of the office building. They were playing sounds of animals being skinned alive. They were protesting outside. So they were causing quite a ruckus.
Yeah, we just released a podcast episode not long ago with Chris from Icon. She and I were basically talking about how much more unified it seems like the grassroots animal rights movement is becoming, and seeing this beautiful relationship between like activists from the United States and activists from Europe, and just all over. Incredible to see. So glad that everybody was able to kind of come together and get the win. So Susie, could you also tell us about the New York actions? We had Fur Free Weekend with AAC and CAFT just a little bit ago, surrounding Fur Free Friday, and it wasn't too long after that. I know there were some cool actions, and I'm wondering if you want to talk about those.
Yes, tons of really great actions for this campaign. So when we kicked off the first protest here in New York City, we had a lot of locals show up, and it was like, I think it was the middle of the day. So really thankful for everybody that came out. We had this really huge, giant blow up fox. We were just trying to get attention. It was a very loud, obnoxious protest. Thank you, Rachel, for the giant fox. thought it really added to the protest. But yeah, the first protest, we were there. Stephen Kolb, the CEO of the CFDA, who's the Council of Fashion Designers of America. So they run and they organize the fashion schedule. So they're the ones who can implement the fur-free policy and who eventually did. So Stephen Kolb came outside. He saw the protest. He was filming us. We tried calling him out, but he ran back inside. And then, yeah, we had another protest in front of the headquarters. And then the day after Fur Free Weekend, so AAC hosted Fur Free Weekend in New York City. We had a ton of activists that came in. We also, during Fur Free Weekend, we got some reports that there were wheat paste posters all over the surrounding area of the CFDA offices. And we actually saw them on the Monday when we went to go protest. But yeah, there was tons of activists that were still in town. So there was a very loud disruption in the lobby of the CFDA offices in their South Seaport offices. And a few activists even made it up to the 24th floor and knocked on the door. No one answered, even though there was somebody there. So yeah, I think that probably freaked them out a little bit. The fact that activists were able to go all the way up to the 24th floor. And probably my favorite action was the decorating of the Christmas tree. So there was a ton of homemade ornaments that were made with some really cute designs. They were all anti-fur messages. Some were, not appropriate to mention on the live stream, but they were quite funny. So yeah, during the lobby disruption, a few of the activists actually decorated the Christmas tree. So they had these homemade ornaments, which were made out of paper plates. So we put it all around the Christmas tree. I think even the garlands on the second floor ended up with some ornaments. So I'm sure they weren't very pleased.
I saw the photos on CAFT's Instagram, which, by the way, if you're not following CAFT on Instagram, you should be. But yeah, it was so funny because the photos sort of looked like something out of a Hallmark movie, but the messages on the the ornaments were maybe not so Hallmark friendly. I thought that was great. So can one of you just tell me a little bit more about the CFDA? Because I think historically in the past, when you think about going after a fashion week, you think about activists who are jumping up on the runway and things like that. And that's not exactly how this was won. So who's the CFDA and why'd you decide to go after them? And how did that all kind of work?
Yeah, sure. So the CFDA, so basically all of the big fashion shows, they all have a fashion council similar to the CFDA that dictates the fashion calendars, which designers are going to be welcome to be there, so on and so forth. And you're definitely right, Trey, it's not your typical campaign. And as we've gotten further and further along with which designers are left and which companies we're going after, one of the things that's always made CAFT a little bit different, at least compared to the majority of organizations that are around today, is that we rarely ever just go after one target or one company that's involved in the sale of fur. We typically will go after their parent companies and the infrastructure that basically we'll go after their parent companies and whoever has leverage and control over the company. But with the CFDA and with New York Fashion Week, it was a very kind of an odd campaign to research and to kind of wrap our heads around, because it's not a company where it's just oh, this one company that's then owned by a parent company that we can target and they have a couple investors or something like that. That's not at all how the New York Fashion Week is run. It's a joint partnership. There's IMG involved that owns the trademark to it, that has been involved in the production and a huge part of it for well over a decade. There were new players being involved called the Venue Collective that were ran by this person, Leslie Russo, and this person, Ahmad, that from N4XT Experiences based out of Los Angeles. that host a bunch of the events. And then there's also the CFDA. So like there's numerous players involved in basically the production and planning of this event. But ultimately, the CFDA is the one that sets the calendar. They're the ones that decide which events are official New York Fashion Week events and which ones are not. Which another thing that added to the confusion, there's lots of unofficial New York Fashion Week events because there's other like basically groups that are trying to like piggyback off of it. But the ones that are officially New York Fashion Week, basically the CFDA decides which events, which fashion shows, which designers are welcome to be in that. And that was ultimately like, you know, that's why like we kind of put the majority of our focus on the CFDA. And, you know, we're able to identify that the CFDA were the ones that had the decision-making power, in part because of the way other fashion weeks have gone for free in the past. It's always coming from the fashion councils. So yeah, but it was drastically different than a lot of the other campaigns where it's like a corporation that's then owned by this company. There's a lot of players involved in New York Fashion Week. And I'm not gonna lie, I'm like almost a little disappointed that the campaign didn't last longer because we spent a lot of time figuring that out. And obviously I'm always really happy when we get a win and don't have to actually, you know, go the whole mile. But yeah, there was that was definitely a campaign that was like harder to figure out because there's so many players involved and just the infrastructure of it. It's quite a bit different than your typical just like fashion house.
Yeah, sorry, I'm kind of disappointed we didn't get to protest the runway shows. That would have been fun.
Yeah, that would have been fun. I just wanted to put it out there for anybody that doesn't know that the CFDA is the Council of Fashion Designers of America. And Susie, I know that I believe it. Correct me if I'm wrong. You guys are getting so many wins; it's really kind of hard to keep up with, which is a good thing. But I know earlier this year, anti-fur activists, I believe it was the Boston Fashion Week and Chicago Fashion Week, and there might be some others that I'm missing from recent history. And of course, the huge Condé Nast victory that was secured in October, Condé Nast being the parent company of Vogue magazine and several other influential publications. But how much have those victories sort of paved the path to get this victory so quickly? Because you guys just often win so fast. I mean, I know the Vogue campaign, I mean, it took nine months, which in my opinion is fast for a company of that size and with that kind of reputation in the fashion industry. So how much is there just sort of like a domino effect? Like how much does momentum have to do with these wins?
I think it's a big part of it, especially with the Condé Nast campaign. It was a very big campaign. It, like you said, it took 9 months, and we got a lot of media coverage from it. Some of it, not so favorable. So, I mean, the campaign lasted a long time, and we were doing home demos. So we were protesting the homes of executives. There were lots of cities involved: DC, Boston, Chicago, London. So yeah, I think with every win and with every sort of difficult campaign, we build up a reputation. So, the next target that we go after, they know what's coming. They know that if they hold out for a little bit too long, the next step is, okay, well, if you're not listening to us when we send you an email, when we protest outside of your store or your office, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to stand outside of your home and we're going to bother you. We're going to bother your neighbors. So I think all the publicity, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think almost all of the media coverage that we got mentioned the fact that we were protesting outside the executives' homes of Condé Nast. So I think that definitely helped. We were very confident going into New York Fashion Week. They seemed a little bit friendly just because of the fact that they were actually communicating with us. Yeah, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that, Tyler.
Yeah. We did feel really good about New York Fashion Week going into it. And, so one of the things that we were doing in the weeks and months leading up was trying to identify some more of those like high value targets. And one of the ways that one of the systems that we did to figure it out was going through the fashion councils of the big four fashion shows and going through their boards of directors, going through their memberships, and seeing which designers were involved in the different fashion councils that still sold fur. And we were in part doing that because we wanted to soften the target of, like, say, New York Fashion Week. And it turned out as we went through it, it was like, oh, wow, actually nobody on the board actually sells fur. And on top of that, it turns out that a lot of the board members are designers that went fur free because of CAFT, because of past campaigns. So we off the top knew, like, oh, well, these designers are definitely going to know who we are off the top. So then we started going through basically the board of directors and trying to figure out if they've ever made any sort of commentary about their positions on fur to get an idea if they would be friendly towards us or not, or which board members would be resistant. And that gave us a lot of insight on the campaign. And as it turned out, Stephen Kolb, the president, turns out to be very sympathetic towards animal rights causes. I believe that he's openly a vegetarian. He talks about being vegetarian in numerous articles. And, you know, I mean, basically just reading between the lines, it seemed pretty obvious that this was a company that wasn't going to be super difficult, especially when, you know, when we go protest them. You know, we got Tom Brown, who's the chairman of the board of directors that went fur free a handful of years ago when CAFT went after them. And we're thinking, like, man, like, the only designers that really have fur at New York Fashion Week is, like, you know, Romeo Hunt, Laquan Smith. You know, they're like some decent names, but certainly not on the level of, like, Tom Brown or, you know, Calvin Klein, some of the bigger names that are on the board. And it just didn't make any sense for them to want to hold out. Like, why the hell would they want to deal with us 365 days a year, showing up outside of their offices, showing up outside of their executives' homes, you know, going to IMG, a company that they partner with in the production of the event, you know, going to NX, you know, the Venue Collective, another company that they partner with the event, and bothering them year round over, like, 3 designers having a couple pieces of fur. It just doesn't add up. And I think that's kind of where we're getting as we get further and further down this road, is like, there is a little bit of a domino effect, not a little bit, a bit of a domino effect happening right now, because there's so few designers left doing it. It's like, why hold out? You know what I mean? So yeah.
Yeah, you said a lot of interesting things there, but one thing I kind of want to hone in on is reputation. I mean, and it also seems like the larger, like, fashion world, you know, like those that are at the top, so to speak, maybe that's kind of a small community and word sort of gets around to those people. Is that kind of the case?
I think so, for sure. So Susie mentioned earlier that CAFT is a group that runs off of, like, a decentralized model for campaigning. And for those of you that don't know what that means, is basically, you know, CAFT USA is a nonprofit that is a handful of volunteers and a handful of staff that basically run a website, work on the back end of the campaigns with, like, research and identifying targets and, like, vulnerabilities. But ultimately, you know, it's operated through grassroots activists, just random, not random, but like any grassroots activist can just be part of the campaign by simply going out there and protesting and showing up with a sign outside of one of the targets. And this was a model that CAFT did not come up with. It was very similarly modeled after the Shack campaign. And part of the reason we do that is because we need to give these grassroots activists that are out there working autonomously, like, an umbrella, like basically like a representative to the companies that we're going after. Because, like, now that CAFT is, like, you know, with the help of dozens of grassroots groups around the world, now that we've racked up so many wins, And a lot of it's under this like umbrella of CAFT that then like represents all these like smaller groups that work autonomously on the campaigns. It builds up a reputation. And then like when we email these companies and when we deal with them, a lot of the times we can see very clearly like, oh, this was a reputational win because, you know, we barely even protested them and they just caved immediately because they can look at the track record and go, oh no, I don't want to deal with that. So I think reputation has a huge part of it, and like building up of that reputation is done like with the help of like the grassroots and all these individual groups that are working autonomously on their own. And like that is why like CAFT like has basically like filled that void to be like basically to represent it, because we do need like a larger name that like a the CFDA or New York Fashion Week can actually have heard of, because there was like news articles about it, and that really helps the grassroots get these quick wins because as soon as they look at it, they know what they're in for. So
and like I said before, the speed of your wins, I just think is incredible. And so Susie, Tyler mentioned, like somebody within the organization, maybe it was like openly vegetarian, and maybe there were some like animal leaning, people in the organization or whatever. Do you think there's anything else that contributed to the speed of this win? I mean, activists really get around your campaigns. I know that's probably one thing. You've got some great activists.
Yeah, I mean, like Tyler mentioned, when we were looking at the Council of Fashion Designers of America, so like they have a board, but they also have members. So there's a lot of very influential members of the CFDA. When we were looking through that list, we had campaigned against so many of these people. Like Marc Jacobs is on it. Tom Brown is the chair. The CAFT campaigned against Tom Brown. Stacey Bendet, she's from Alice and Olivia. That was another. So yeah, I think these people are just aware of who we are. Many of them have already dealt with us, and they just don't want to. And I think it was a short campaign, but I really loved the creativity, because it was, I would have liked to protest the runway, but we didn't do that. So all we had to work with were protesting offices. So of course, you have to get a little bit creative. There were activists that were wheat pasting, stickering around the office, the ornaments, the disruptions inside. We had that big giant fox. There were some activists that poured blood all over the lobby, outside, not inside. Yeah, so I think there was a lot of creativity, and just our reputation too that contributed to this very quick win.
Yeah, I'm gonna ask you guys later about how people can get involved in the campaigns, but what you said about creativity just kind of makes me think about how there can be something for everybody in a campaign. Even if you don't feel comfortable or not able to push yourself to, get in the streets and get loud. There's so many different ways to get involved in a campaign, and I'm sure we'll get into some of that a little bit later. But Susie, I was also wondering from you, do you think that there was like a clear turning point in the campaign? Like when did you kind of have a sense that you were about to win? And if so, tell us about that.
Yes. Well, first of all, I think the fact that AAC hosted for a free weekend helped a lot. It brought a lot of activists into town, and I think they saw, there was two protests in front of the offices initially. We had maybe, I don't know, I would say like 10 to 15 people. The last protest, we had over 25 people. And so the number just kept growing and growing. And also, I think the fact that some activists were able to sneak up to the 24th floor and bang on the door and, try to get into the office, or, just have a little disruption outside. I think that was probably a turning point. But I think the fact that they saw, like this is just growing and growing. There's more and more people coming to these protests. And, you know, there's different cities involved. So London, they were protesting. It really, I think the longer that they would hold out, the more sort of out of control it would get. And it would just start spiraling. It's going to be more and more people getting involved, which is what happened with Condé Nast.
Yeah, I think it was smart of them to wave the white flag early on, because as the saying goes, CAFT always wins. And so I didn't think it was going to be any different this time. Tyler, I want to ask you, what do you think that this victory, New York Fashion Week going for free, what does it mean for the broader fashion industry? You talked a little bit about that strategy of kind of like having that stranglehold on what can be promoted, but I'm wondering if there's anything else you want to kind of add to those ideas with.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think if you just look at any major publication these days about what they're talking about in reference to fur, is that the writing is on the wall. You know what I mean? Like, it's very clear that designers and fashion at large is taking a really big step away from the fur industry. And I think that, you know, that's obvious. And like, as we're moving forward, like, you know, there are so few designers that are still doing it. And the designers that are doing it pretty much tend to be consolidated under the umbrella of LVMH. And unfortunately, LVMH, a lot of those brands are, I mean, quite frankly, some of the biggest fashion designers in the world, like Louis Vuitton, like Fendi, like Dior, that are all still selling fur. And, you know, I think that is a major problem. But, you know, part of why we did New York Fashion Week, part of why we did Vogue, was we acknowledge and know that those brands are very, very difficult. And we believe that basically we can soften them, make them easier and softer targets if we get institutions like, you know, Vogue and New York Fashion Week to go for free, and keep moving in that direction overall. So, you know, I think, you know, I do think that we still have quite a bit of work cut out for us. In fact, I'm actually, you know, it's actually pretty daunting to know that there are just a handful of companies left that are big and relevant outside of brands under the LVMH umbrella. But yeah, I mean, you look at any fashion publication, they're all talking about it. It's saying, look, you know, fur's done. You know, there are some discussions right now. I see this all the time with basically discussions about like shearling and discussions about vintage fur and like what roles those play in the fashion industry. And, you know, we see some of that talk, but overall, we're feeling very positive about the direction, and yeah, stoked.
Awesome. We do have a question from the comments. So thank you, nerds like us, for contributing with a question. How long will it take for the fur industry to start feeling these changes? I think they might already be. It seems like. What do you think, Susie?
Oh, I mean, I think they're definitely feeling it. Like Tyler said, the number of designers that are actually using, influential designers that are actually using fur is very, very small. LVMH is probably the biggest company propping up fur, and you know, they're actually not using it as much fur as they were in previous years. Poland just banned fur farming, which is huge. I can't even, you know, describe how amazing that is, because they were, I think, the second biggest producer of fur outside of China. So that's amazing. And the EU is about to vote on whether to ban fur farming, and I think the importation of fur as well. So yeah, I think they're feeling it. The fact that all these major publications, Vogue magazine, we just won the Hearst campaign, so Harper's Bazaar, Town and Country, Esquire magazine. So influential fashion publications aren't promoting fur. New York Fashion Week bans fur. London Fashion Week. They're definitely feeling it.
Something to add to that a little bit is so it's just I was just listening to some people from the the Fur Institute of Canada talk on a podcast, and it was actually from a few months ago, and they were talking about how they've been having to shift their marketing strategy for how they promote fur because the writing's on the wall that like they're no longer really able to promote fur in the traditional way by say like just paying Vogue magazine or just paying. They actually didn't specify which magazine specifically, but they said they no longer can just pay to have a spread in a magazine because more and more these magazines are moving away from fur. And when they were talking about that, it was actually 2 months before the Vogue magazine win. So like they're already well aware of what's going on and they are strategizing around how to overcome it. And like to me, like it's really important that we pay attention to this because like one of the big things that the fur industry's been doing is like they specifically go after up and coming designers that don't have a lot to lose, like say like Laquan Smith or Romeo Hunt, that are like relatively decent names that they can then sponsor and get fur on the runway. And that's part of the ways that they're promoting it now is they're going after these small designers to promote it. One of the things that they were talking about overcoming the fact that bigger institutions like Vogue and now Harper's Bazaar are not going to be featuring fur is by using like influencers and things like that. And while obviously like that's a problem and we don't want them to get any traction, I think it's certainly something to celebrate that they are like basically on timeout in the corner. They're like this like little irrelevant piece of fashion that's being put in the past, and they are aware of it and see it in real time. And it's very inspiring whenever I listen to or follow anything that's coming out of the fur industry because it is very doom and gloom. They're doing the opposite of what the anti-fur movement's doing right now with celebrating and being stoked. They are not feeling happy about the future forward with fashion and fur. So
yeah, that's what we like to hear. Yeah. So I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit more about the victory that happened today. You both alluded to it a little bit. I'm going to ask you more about it in a little bit, but for those that don't know, check Instagram. It's everywhere. Hearst magazines, they went for free. Before we could even get this live stream off for the New York Fashion Week victory, CAFT has done it yet again. They have won another campaign. I'm sure you've all heard of Esquire magazine. That's one of the publications under this umbrella. So, I mean, it's unstoppable. The momentum is just, it's unbelievable right now. But before we jump into that, I want to go back to Susie mentioning Poland banning fur farming there. And I want to ask you both your opinion on this. But I know CAFT is strictly, really into pressure campaigns when it comes to the fur industry and, targeting businesses. But what kind of role does the legislation play in all of this? And will we ultimately have to have this legislation for the world to be fur free? And how do the campaigns sort of help lay the groundwork for that? And maybe even vice versa. Susie, you want to go first?
Yeah, I think legislation is the end goal. The reason why we're at this point in time where a country like Poland can ban fur farming is because of the work of many, many activists over like decades. It's incredible that we've gotten to this point, like such a major producer of fur, banning it finally. It's incredible. And it's like a really emotional feeling. And all the campaigns that we work on, not just CAFT, but the entire anti-fur movement, every company that drops fur is one less company that is going to oppose legislation for banning fur. So I think the more companies that we get to drop fur, the easier it'll be. And like I said, legislation is the end goal. Hopefully once we beat LVMH, you're going to start to see more and more legislation popping up so that it doesn't come back. And we absolutely need legislation to ban farming so it never comes back.
And I've noticed that even cities that may not have a CAFT target in their area, I've noticed that a lot of them are going after like local sex shops or something that might have like a little bit of fur on an adult toy or something like that if they're unable to physically participate in the street because they don't have a Berluti or they don't have a Loro Piana in their city or something like that. So I'm thinking, that's laying that groundwork to get fur, banned in cities and so forth. And I just think it's great how it's all coming together. But Tyler, I want to get your opinion on the legislation thing too. I know you've been in the animal rights movement for, I'm not sure how long, a long time, probably a couple decades or something like that, pretty close. But 2005, there you go. So you've been around for a while. So have you seen this with anything else as far as like the pressure campaigns leading the way for legislation and just sort of your thoughts about that in general?
Not as direct as we're seeing here. I do know that CAFT's like general theory of change is that we believe that we need everybody involved in this. We believe that we need the educators, the agitators, and of course the legislators to push forward this issue so that we can finally put this industry to an end. And as Susie said earlier, there's groups that have been working on this for a lot longer than CAFT USA is, at least the current iteration of it. And I really do think that like what CAFT is doing is only possible because of the cultural changes that have happened already because of bigger groups that are out there, educating the public on this issue. So then when a smaller group like CAFT comes around and pushes our weight around and does more aggressive tactics and strategies that say a bigger organization wouldn't do, it all of a sudden actually matters a lot more. And like we actually get somewhere with it because we already have the majority of the public on our side with these issues from, like I said, other groups that are much larger that have been working on this for a very long period of time. And like when you look at like the CAFT wins, not a single win that we've ever had was because we educated the public. Every single win we've ever had was because we pressured the company directly. If you go and walk around in the public and ask people if they've ever heard of CAFT, I guarantee you that 100% of them will say no. And so I really believe that like it needs to start with education and getting people more on board with what we're doing. I think that smaller groups that do pressure campaigns like CAFT can come behind those groups and then enforce what the public already feels is right. And I think that we need groups that are then coming behind that and passing legislation to basically seal the deal and make it really difficult for this industry to ever make a comeback. And I can guarantee you from everything I read about the fur industry, the fur industry and the people that are lobbying for fur, they are very concerned with this legislation, even tiny pieces of legislation that are in areas that don't have any fur farms or don't really have any fur for that matter, because they do see it as like the first step that could create like a domino effect. And they're very concerned about it. So, and Poland is not a little place that has very little fur. In fact, it's one of the biggest producers of fur up there with Greece, Finland, and Spain. And this is, I mean, it's devastating to the fur industry, and they know it. And yeah, I couldn't be more stoked. And anybody who is out there listening who isn't as into pressure campaigns, start doing some legislation. It's not CAFT's. It's not what we're good at. It's not our specialty, but we are fully supportive of it. And any groups that are working on that, we would love to support you guys in any way possible. So yeah, extremely stoked about that.
I have to say that Polish activists have just been on fire lately. Everybody who worked on that fur farming ban, like, thank you so much. All the people who worked on that. And then there's a grassroots group in Poland, and I hope that somebody from their crew will teach me how to say their name so that I can give them a proper shout out, because I'm not going to make a fool of myself right now trying to pronounce it. But they have been incredible. Check AAC's Instagram. We've been collabing with them on some posts because they've been getting such great victories in the anti-foie gras world. And we've got somebody from that crew right now in the comments, you know, so stoked about what's happening with fur in Poland. You know, the ban, it's going to be incredible. It is going to be an 8-year phase out, but it's so great that entire countries are just, you know, starting to ban this. And I also think it's really cool that, I mean, even though, you know, we all wish it was going away in less than 8 years, the government's even, you know, giving these fur farmers like incentives to get out of the industry quicker than the 8 years, which I think is really cool. I mean, I would love to see something like that, you know, in the United States and elsewhere. Yeah, but I mean, before long, I guess it won't matter either way at the rate that things are going, but anything that can speed this process up, I think would be fantastic. And speaking of people in the comments, we've got our friend David. He said his group in Canada is protesting LVMH targets this Sunday. So there's a little inspiration for everybody to get out in the street and contribute toward these campaigns that are very much winning. And there's also a question in the comments. Susie, I'll ask this to you. What factors do you think contribute to your team being so strong? For example, do you recommend that groups have frequent team meetings or just frequent communication in general? What are some of the best practices for keeping all that glue together?
It's a funny question. Yeah, I think frequent communication, of course, like, you know, our team is constantly talking to each other. I think, you know, working with people who you really get along with, because, you know, we're all friends, and, you know, we've all known each other for a few years now, especially when you're working so closely on these campaigns. You're really like in constant communication. Like, we talk to each other, I don't know, like 24 hours a day. So I think, you know, we don't necessarily have the best work-life balance, but I think that's also something that's very important for sure. But yeah, I think just, you know, picking a team of people that, you know, you all get along with, you have very similar ideas, the same theory of change, communicating frequently. And yeah, I think that's probably the most important thing.
All right, Tyler, we've got a question for you from the comments. This is an interesting one. It says, is there any way to raise or hunt fur that is humane, that is not part of the fashion industry? I'd love your take.
No, there's not. I mean, if you're raising animals for the explicit purpose of killing them, it's not humane. Sorry, it's not. So I would say no.
To the point. I like it. For those that don't know, and I can
roadkill. If they find a roadkill and want to turn that into a fur garment, go for it. But if you're raising animals for fur, it's 100% wrong all the time.
Yeah, and many would even argue that that's still some sort of weird commodification or something like that. Even
I try to steer clear of some of that stuff, because like one of the issues we even have is like even faux fur is, as it's become more and more popular, it's actually becoming harder and harder to identify which publications and which designers are having it, because now that it's so widespread and faux fur is so accepted, the fashion publications are no longer specifying like, oh, this is faux fur, or oh, this is real fur, because there's just so much faux fur. And the reality is that it's actually normalizing fur with some of the younger generations, because most people, they just see fur. You know what I mean? They don't see faux fur, vintage fur, you know, mink fur. It's kind of all the same to them. So yeah, on that note, even the roadkill, I would be a little bit shy from, because like having the fur out there does, you know, promoting that look even is inadvertently promoting the use of real fur, because a lot of people are not going to do their homework and go check like, oh, was that fur item, real mink fur, or was it faux fur, or was it, was it vintage? Was it this? So me personally, I would advise to steer away from it completely for that reason. But yeah.
I want to go off on a slight tangent, and I'm able to talk about this only because, Tyler went to prison for this and has talked about it openly, so I can talk about it. But I really wanted to have Tyler on our live stream that we had a little bit back. We reported on some of the ALF actions that were happening. One being in Illinois, and Tyler said he's been around since 2005 in the animal rights movement, and Tyler was arrested at the fur farm that was recently raided. Just I think that was like in October. It was in October, same month as the Vogue win, same month as the Omni Foie Gras win. And it was a crazy month, 2 ALF raids and some campaign victories. But I'm wondering, Tyler, since this question came up, I thought that might be a good opportunity for you to talk about just in general, what fur farms are like, if you've seen, some of that cruelty firsthand, like just kind of talk a little bit about what the animals go through and why we're fighting so hard to end this industry. But I would also love to hear what it felt like to hear that fur farm that you were arrested at got raided successfully. No one caught it. Just maybe that was kind of like a full circle moment for you.
Yeah, no, I was beyond stoked when I heard the news about Eshelman Fur Farm, Fox Farm being raided. I know one of the reasons, that we were looking at it outside of it being one of the bigger fox farms in the country, was there's some very famous footage that PETA put out in a undercover investigation from that fox farm. And anybody who's seen like the PETA footage that's black and white of like the foxes being electrocuted, you've seen what it looks like inside of Eshelman Fox Farm. So yeah, no, it was it put a huge smile on my face to hear that farm specifically was raided, but also just makes me really inspired to see that the Animal Liberation Front is still active to this day. And I do feel like there was a good handful of years where they were less active in North America. And further, like I've been loving seeing the focus of the North American Animal Liberation Front actions being a lot on the fur industry. Because I know when I first got into direct action, I started doing some very petty things, small things. I can't speak in specifics about all of them, but like basically like one of the things that really drives me is not just like participating in crime or ALF actions and things like that. It's participating in direct action that's really going to like matter and really going to like actually like liberate animals or move us closer towards beating these big campaigns. So like when I see like, the Animal Liberation Front in North America going after the fur industry, it definitely warms my heart because, we're on the final stretch and we really do need all hands on board. We need the legislators, we need the agitators, and we need the educators. And while CAFT is not in the business of illegal agitation, the underground movement, the Animal Liberation Front, they are able to go out there and directly rescue these animals from these places of abuse, put a serious financial damage on the fur farms that are targeted, and overall just give the fur farmers less incentive to stick around when it's already like pretty dire out there for them because of how few designers are selling fur. Those pelt prices keep going, get lower and lower at the Saga auctions. So yeah, it's really inspiring to see that. I think your other question, Trey, was about some of the conditions on these fur farms, and it's surreal walking into a fur farm. I know the fur farm that I was caught and convicted for raiding and closing was in Morris, Illinois, not that far from Eshelman Fox Farm. And one of the things you never forget is like when you walk into those sheds, into the mink sheds, and it's pitch dark outside, all you have is like a red headlamp on your head. And then you can see the reflection of thousands of minks' eyes all just staring back at you, wondering what it is that you're doing. And, as you start opening the cages, like none of the minks immediately start popping out of the cages. They all take a little moment to hesitate, pay attention to their surroundings, what's going on. But it seems like once the first handful of minks pop out of those cages and start jumping onto the ground, presumably for the first time in their entire lives, it's almost like they all are able to communicate with each other because they all start joining in and start jumping out of those cages. And it's pretty heartbreaking to see like the type of confinement that these animals endure, because these animals are in a very small cage, and 3 and 4 sometimes at a time in these tiny cages, and they live their entire short lives that way. So it's absolutely horrendous, and yeah, it's awful. So
thanks for taking us through that. I mean, I've seen a lot of video footage online of what these animals go through. And I mean, I think even a verbal description should be enough for somebody to know that it's wrong, but it's always great, I think, to get somebody's perspective of, somebody who's actually been there and looked into those animals' eyes and have seen that. Just makes it all that much more real. And I can imagine, if I were on a fur farm and I saw that, I'd be wanting to spend a lot of my life fighting the fur industry however I could too. So I'm so thankful for the work that CAFT is doing. I've personally learned so much from CAFT, and I'm so thankful for AAC's relationship with CAFT and just everything you guys are about. So thanks for giving us that perspective.
I just want to
yeah,
I just wanted to add something real quick, because when I was listening to just now Tyler talk about the conditions that these animals are kept in, it's really important to keep that in the back of your mind, because I know that like protesting can be really uncomfortable, and especially when you're at the point in a campaign where you're protesting outside of someone's home, or you're protesting in office, and it's just kind of like awkward and uncomfortable and embarrassing sometimes. But I always think this is momentary, and what these animals are going through is so much worse. So I can stand out here and be angry and protest and be loud and be obnoxious and sometimes make a fool out of myself, but it's nothing compared to what these animals are going through.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I know in New York, it's probably getting pretty cold up there, kind of maybe, not the most fun to protest in. I'm going to get to this in a little bit too, but we are going to try to fix that with convergence out in Los Angeles during the winter. That might, help ease everybody a little bit, make it a little bit easier to get out there. But yeah, I do think it's so important too, because, with these pressure campaigns, I mean, it's just so exciting, especially with CAFT, because, the strategies, I mean, you all just know how to win. And honestly, it's so fun to win. I spent so much of my time before I discovered pressure campaigns, doing activism that, I think is good and I think is helpful and I think people should still continue to do. But for me, switching to something that's so tangible, it just makes me feel good about doing activism, because I know for sure that I'm making a difference when I work on a CAFT campaign, for example. But at the same time, it's important to find that balance of, we don't want to think about the animals like 24/7, or else we'll just be miserable and it'll be even harder to crawl out of bed and get to that protest. I think it's okay to like have fun at a protest and all those kinds of things. But I did want to circle that back around to the animals for a minute, because, that's why we're doing this. Anybody who is dedicating as much time and effort and contributing their talents to a campaign like these two on the live stream are, I mean, it's because they've seen what the animals go through, and nobody deserves what these animals go through. I mean, they're trapped in cages. It's horrific. You know, like crawl inside of your dog's crate for an hour, just an hour, and see how great that feels. You know, that's what these animals endure their whole entire lives, and the only relief they ever get is, you know, unless the ALF comes to rescue them or something like that, which is rare, the only relief they ever get is death, and the death is terrible too. So that's why we want to end this industry. And, you know, Tyler, we've got so many questions in the comments, and I want to get to them all. So maybe we can try to be as brief as we can with the answers, so that we can try to get everybody's questions. But I do want to bring something up, which is, you know, I think it was around the 90s or maybe the early 2000s when everybody kind of thought fur was dead, and they, you know, kind of thought, hey, we can let our foot off the gas. And this is something we've talked about live streams on before, but as we get closer and closer to the goal, I think it's even more important to talk about it more, because, you know, I don't think we can lose focus on the fur industry. You know, it's going down. I mean, the momentum, I mean, you can see the trajectory, the writing is on the wall. Fur is going to be over eventually, virtually, but only if activists continue to do the great work that they're doing at a great level. So I'm wondering if you could just talk about that, because you were maybe you were like a little bit after that, or right around that time, but maybe you can talk about that from experience.
So, well, I'm not that old, so this is a little bit before my time. However, you know, when CAFT first started, we took a big amount of time to go and talk to people that have been around longer than we have, to get their takes on the situation, to basically come up with like the best plan that we could possibly for restarting CAFT. And for those that don't know, Coalition Abolish the Fur Trade, we restarted it in 2020. But Coalition Abolish the Fur Trade has been around since the late 80s. And it's actually, it's been around since the late 80s, early 90s. And basically in the late 80s, Trans Species Unlimited and Last Chance for Animals started Fur Free Friday. And for, you know, a little over a decade, pretty much all of the grassroots attention was on the fur industry. And you know, there used to be these zines. I actually still think they are around, but there's been zines and publications going around for years called The Final Nail, which was basically a publication that was showing you where all of the fur farms were, to advocate for people to basically raid these fur farms, and, you know, and to drive the final nail, because we're so close to beating the fur industry. And I think for a long time, people just assumed that we would win. And by all means, you know, there was a big downtick in it. And when you look at the number of pelts that were produced in North America in 1999, that was the last low point in the production of these minks until very recently, till COVID, really. One of the things that I find interesting about that situation is Shack UK started in 1999, and Shack UK, you know, started their activism, was doing something new, something creative, something that, quite frankly, CAFT has taken a lot of inspiration from, and activists that were working on fur for over a decade, were disappointed that the majority of the grassroots was then moving to this new, shiny, new, exciting thing that was younger, hipper, more aggressive. And people shifted their attention. And if you look at the USDA numbers of the minks pelts that were produced, they steadily rise at 1999. And anti-fur activism slowly took a step back, and activists started focusing on vivisection. And when I got involved in animal rights, that was kind of the thing to work on. It was the Shack campaign. We were going after UCLA to get vivisectors to stop testing on primates. You know, I worked on a campaign called Gateway to Hell, where we're going after airliners to get them to stop shipping primates from the breeding facilities to the laboratories. And that was where all the attention was. And I spent, you know, about 10 years working on those campaigns, and we won some really big campaigns, but it wasn't easy. It was actually very, very difficult. And we weren't really seeing the results that we were hoping for with it because there were still more animals being killed every year. And honestly, like around 2013, when Shack UK closed up shop, I basically committed that at that point, like I'm going to focus on fur, and I'm going to focus on things that I know without a shadow of a doubt are saving the lives of animals. Because, if we're giving up our weekends to go do protests, we're asking other people to give up their weekends with their friends and family to go do protests. Like, I want to make damn sure that like we're actually achieving something with it. And yeah, kind of that realization and seeing it in real time, how much effort the animal rights movement put on vivisection and how much we didn't succeed, basically kind of just shifted my perception on how we should do things. And we landed on fur because, for instance, like, I race mountain bikes, and, if someone was going to be getting into mountain bikes or some extreme sport like this, you start off small. You start by tackling like the easy tasks and, getting your foundation of skills developed so that you can then do the harder, maneuvers on a mountain bike. And I think, like, to me, I kind of apply that same logic to like activism and campaigning, is like, why do we start with like the hardest industries, which is what seems like a lot of the movement wants to do. Like, let's focus on agriculture because that's where the most animals are killed. But it's also the hardest industry to tackle. They have the most money. They're not suffering. They're killing more animals every single year. And with fur, it's this one area that we're winning. And quite frankly, as much as CAFT would like to take credit for it, it's far from CAFT doing it all. We had a huge, it feels disrespectful to almost call this a gift, but COVID-19, really shifted the playing field for the fur industry. And I feel like we have an opportunity that we have to capitalize on. And I know for me, I will always regret it if I don't like put 100% effort in, because we've seen the animal rights movement do this in the past, where like we made a bunch of traction on the fur industry. There's a bunch of activists that were, believing that it was almost done, and then we shift attention to something new and different without finishing the first job, without finishing the job. And so that's been kind of CAFT's goal, is to basically just keep the focus on fur until we do everything humanly possible to put them out of business. And that's directly motivated because we've seen how things have gone down in the past, and we've seen how, the ups and downs of the focus on the industry, and we've yet to put one out of business. So yeah. Sorry I ramble so much. Hopefully that answered the question, Trey.
No, that wasn't rambling at all. It wasn't rambling at all. I think that was all super valuable information, and quite honestly, information I wish that I had when I first started pressure campaigning. Unfortunately, when I realized that I wanted to start pressure campaigning, I jumped right into that. And, then Tyler, I actually, you and I had a phone call, and I learned a lot from you just in one phone call about, hey, pressure campaigning is the thing, but maybe you should be, doing some things differently. And, so I think you're just a wealth of knowledge about this stuff that people can really learn from. And yeah, I do think it's important to drive home that we should all be spending our time as wisely as possible. We only have so much time on Earth, and we want to make the best of it for animals. And, when we're expecting people to get behind a campaign, we want to make sure it's one that's worthwhile. And CAFT has done such an excellent job of that. I would recommend anybody that wants to get involved in a campaign to come to CAFT and get involved with that. But Susie, I want to ask you a question that is also from the comments. Let me find it. We've got so many rolling in. All right. The Jasmines. What about big celebrities like Sabrina Carpenter, who promoted a fox fur coat by Louis Vuitton at the 2025 Met Gala? What should we do about the celebrities who are promoting fur?
Yeah, I mean, the problem with celebrities is that, you know, people follow what they do. They're very influential. So when a celebrity starts wearing fur, it puts it in the spotlight for the wrong reasons. So I think if you get an opportunity to, you know, fur shame a celebrity, you should do it. A book signing, a press event. The thing with that is that especially if it's a public event and a celebrity gets fur shamed, it's highly likely, not all the time, but highly likely that it'll get press and it'll get media. And I think it's really important to keep these issues in the media and to make it known that wearing fur is still problematic and you're still going to be called out for it. There's lots of activists who, you know, in years past have done a lot of great work in New York City and LA for shaming celebrities like Rachel, Rob Banks. They did a lot of celebrity shaming. So, yeah, I think if you get an opportunity to do it, go for it.
Yeah, and even though that's not necessarily part of a campaign, is that just kind of like part of the war, the cultural war, I guess?
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome, cool. So it's still helpful to do, even though it's not directly involved with the campaign. Awesome.
I think so.
Cool. Tyler, I've got a question for you from the comments. Well, first I want to say that the Polish group, whose name I can't pronounce, they commented and said that there's a big NGO in Poland who recently decided to fund grassroots anti-fur activism. So that's really great news. That's cool. We like it when the big orgs help out the grassroots. That's really cool. All right, here's the question from I Do Not Like This Music. They ask, what are your thoughts on targeting China? That's how the question's phrased. I'm assuming they mean just about China being one of the largest fur producers, if they might actually be the largest fur producer. And, you know, it might be harder to do activism in China than other places. I'm assuming that's what they mean by that question.
Yeah, that's a great question. So China and Russia, they do have a lot of people purchasing fur in those places still. However, like I think one of the things to take note of is like, you know, China is following trends from the West. You know, so like they want Louis Vuitton, they want Fendi, you know, they want Dior, and whatever those brands are putting out, by and large, is going to set the trends for what, you know, smaller companies are doing, for what the populations are doing in terms of consumer habits. So that is why CAFT has always like kept a strong focus on targets that have a lot of cultural relevance, because we know that has a trickle down effect. So like, you know, when there's some like small, some small designer that no one's ever heard of that then has, you know, some fox fur, more likely than not, they're copying what the big designers are doing that are setting the trends. So that's one of the reasons why we're focusing on them. Another big thing that we're been looking into is there are actually a handful of Chinese department stores that we have been looking at. I'm not going to name them at the moment, but there are a handful of them that CAFT's pretty confident that we could beat if it comes push to shove. We just don't have we've just had other campaigns that have been taking priority before those ones, because those department stores, as big as they may be, they're not as impactful as like Vogue or New York Fashion Week in our eyes at this moment. But we are looking at what we can do in terms of like pressure campaigns to influence like Chinese markets. But the biggest one is focusing on culturally relevant targets, and we do plan on following up with going after whatever department stores and companies that have enough ground in North America and Europe that we can protest them in a significant way to get a win. So
I feel like we could dive so deep into each one of these questions. I'm going to try to get through some of these questions that are in the comments, though. We have a question from our friend Michelle, who hosts many of these live streams. I'm so honored that she's watching, even when she's not on. She said, I think fur is also used for rugs and other types of home decor. Would it be worth it to focus on that in the future once fur for fashion falls, or will it sort of be a domino effect. Susie, would you want to take that one?
Sure. Also, hi, Michelle. So I'm not sure about rugs, but it's definitely, especially Rex rabbit fur is used in home decor. Um, I think it will be a domino effect, especially if, the fur industry is tanking and you're going to start to see less and less of it. But I think that could be a good focus for a local campaign. If your city doesn't have any of like the large LVMH targets, but you have maybe like a smaller store or like a small business that is selling fur products and it doesn't make up a majority of their business model. I say like that's a great focus. Start a local anti-fur campaign in your city. Go after, a store that's selling, a fur pillow or a fur throw or something like that.
We've got a funny little anecdote in the comments from Lauren25. She says, an analogy I heard from Chainsaw Boston, you always need to finish your antibiotics because the last bacteria to go are the most resilient. I think that was in reference to making sure that the fur industry is done this time, and not letting it rise from the ashes. So here's a really great question. And this is for both of you. Susie, you can go first. What are some highlights for you two when you think of the anti-fur movement and your work? I know I've only been involved for about 5 years, and there's just like already so much because so much has happened. But I'd love to hear your take on that, Susie.
I think, there's been many moments, but probably one of the most significant ones, the most significant moment was, when we won the Condé Nast campaign, because that's when I really, took a step back and I was like, oh shit, like we might actually end the fur industry, like our movement, our generation of activists, we're going to be the ones to do it. And it was a 9-month campaign. There was participation from so many cities, and it just really shows how much power us, like everyday people, how much power like we actually have, that we can get a company of that size with that so many resources, so much money. They sent us 2 cease and desist letters, and we were like, I don't care. we're still going after you. We have one thing in mind. We want you to stop promoting fur. And I just think it's a really great example of, the power of our movement. We think our movement is so small. There's really not a lot of us, but when we work together and we focus on one thing, we can accomplish it. So that was one of my proudest moments.
Very, very well said, and I might share in that sentiment. Tyler, what stood out to you over the years?
I think for the longest time, I used to think, for a long time, I used to think like, oh, like, the thing I'll always be the proudest of was, getting onto the Morse Mink Ranch and, raiding that fur farm, releasing all of the animals, and ultimately putting that farm out of business for good. I think there's been a big part of time that I was just like, oh, that's kind of like the best I can do. Like, I don't know how I really top this. And honestly, like, I've been proven wrong since CAFT. Because as Susie said, like the big wins, like against Condé Nast and Vogue, like, yeah, like it really mattered to me, and it was very special to like force a fur farm out of business by raiding it. And it's very direct. It's very clear, like the exact involvement that you had with it, because it is so direct. But I think that if we really want to see this industry put to an end, it really requires more than just those underground actions. I think that we do need a robust grassroots movement on the above ground, working tirelessly and working together. So for me, I think the changing point for me was the Marc Jacobs campaign. I know the Marc Jacobs campaign was going on for a while. and hadn't really gotten much traction. And I moved to New York with some of the people that are directly involved in CAFT now. I basically was in contact with them then before they were directly involved in CAFT and the organizing, or like the planning of the organization at least, and moved out there with not much of a plan. Just had them. They could say I could crash their house a few times a week, shower, slept in my car in the snow. Pretty quickly, they took me in and let me stay at their house for the duration of the campaign. And that was a campaign where we really kind of put it all out on the line, and it paid off. We weren't positive that we could beat Mark Jacobs. In fact, there was doubts that thought that maybe LVMH just would not allow Mark Jacobs to go for free. So it was really just putting a theory to the test and having like a community rally behind it and really get behind it completely. Really inspired me. It led to the team that CAFT has today, that's working on this, 365 days a year, many more hours than 8 per day, and seeing people put their lives on hold to chase this crazy idea that this tiny group of kids sleeping in their cars, running around the neighborhoods with megaphones, are going to get, one of the biggest fashion designers in America to go for free, owned by the biggest fashion conglomerate in the world. Seeing how, the activists got rallied behind it, and then now has transpired into being the team that, works on CAFT directly. I don't know. To me, that was the most inspiring thing, because that was a big shift in CAFT. And then after that, everything kind of just started falling in place, because for the first time ever, we had a bunch of help. You know what I mean? There was a bunch of years there with CAFT that I was working a full-time job. There's a few other people involved that were working full-time jobs, and that was kind of the turning point where all of a sudden, we actually had community support in the way of activists willing to put their lives on hold to work on it. So to me, that was the biggest moment.
Yeah, there's been so many. I know it was probably hard for y'all to even choose. I can think of several just in the time that I've been around and known y'all. So, but yeah, that was really all great to hear. If I haven't got to your question, I so apologize. We are not going to have enough time to take all of these amazing questions, unfortunately, but I'm going to do my best to sort of wrap some of them into, one sort of topic that'll hopefully help everybody who's asking questions, or at least some. But yeah, I do, speaking of all these amazing wins and these amazing moments throughout CAFT history, today was another moment. We alluded to it earlier in the stream, and CAFT posted the announcement just hours before this live stream. Very exciting that, you started a campaign against Hearst magazines right after the New York Fashion Week win. And, we can't even get through this live stream before you get another win, and it's Hearst magazines. So can you tell us, you told us a little bit about it, but Susie, could you tell us more about it and the impact of this win?
Yeah. So, right after New York Fashion Week, we launched a campaign against Hearst magazines. They're the publishers behind Harper's Bazaar, Esquire magazine, Town and Country, which surprisingly advertised a lot of fur and talked a lot about fur. And also Elle magazine. So it's really important to note, Elle magazine went for free in 2021. And they sort of set the precedent for, publications going for free. Because when we started going after Condé Nast, we were using Elle magazine as the example. And yeah, we just thought, so we always had we're always thinking about Hearst magazines, and wondered, why they hadn't just globalized their fur free policy. And then once we were, deciding on whether or not we were going to focus on them, we also found out that Harper's Bazaar in Japan and also their publications in Japan were also fur free. And we think that the Condé Nast win also helped push them towards that. I think there was also lots of other organizations that were probably, talking with Hearst magazines. But yeah, we decided we are going to go ahead and launch, give them that little extra push that they needed. So the campaign lasted 5 days. We had one very loud, disruptive protest inside of Hearst Towers, which is a really nice lobby. It's really great acoustics. It's like kind of like an atrium. Have a nice little waterfall. So they all heard us. Everybody was like looking down from the railings. They were looking at the activists, but and I sent them a few emails. And yeah, I think it's really really important because they have such influential publications. Actually, this is a funny anecdote. So one of our team members, after we won Condé Nast, was kind of like looking through these fur forums, and some fur industry person was like, "Oh well, at least we still have Town and Country." Not anymore. So that was a big fu to the fur industry.
That's that's so funny. Little did that person who left that little comment know.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's really great. I don't want to keep y'all too much longer. I've got a couple more questions, I think, but the big question, your work is tireless. You get all these incredible victories, and of course, we never take that long to celebrate. Maybe we should, but we never take that long to celebrate. We're always saying, "What's next? What are we doing next?" So I'm going to ask you, Susie, what is the next campaign, and how can people get involved in it?
Yeah, so we are about to launch right after this call a campaign against Rick Owens. I'll actually let our campaigns director talk a little bit more about this because he's probably spent the most amount of time looking into it. But Rick Owens is an extremely influential fashion designer based in Europe now, but originally from California. So this is a really exciting campaign because he's very, very well known in the fashion industry. So yeah, Tyler, if you want to talk a little bit about this campaign.
Yeah, we are excited, and yeah, we're really excited to be going after Rick Owens. We've been looking at Rick Owens for a bunch of years now, and there's been numerous other times we thought about pulling the trigger on doing this campaign, but it never quite felt right. Something else always stood out as being, needing our attention more urgently. In part because we thought Rick Owens might be a difficult target because they very much so like fur. They even launched a partial line under Rick Owens that was for fur specifically for a period of time called Hun by Rick Owens, and yeah, but it's been pretty wild. As we've been kind of scraping the barrel with the last designers that are left, we're kind of like getting to the bottom, being like, oh man, here's this really difficult, this big, influential, difficult designer we've been looking at for 4 years, and one of them was Rick Owens, and and I would say the biggest reason we're going after Rick is because of their influence. They're considered like a designer's designer. People really like them. People in the industry really like them, really look up to them. There's quite a bit of a cult following around Rick Owens, and also Rick Owens has people on the board of directors of Paris Fashion Week. And as it should be no surprise to the fashion industry or to the fur industry at this point, but CAFT, the anti-fur movement, we do have our eyes set on getting, all of the big four, there's 2 remaining, Milan and Paris, all of the big fashion weeks to turn their back on fur, because that's really just going to drive that narrative deeper and further that like culture, fashion, people are done with fur. And so like Rick Owens, that's kind of part of the motivating factor with them is they're one of 4 members on the board of Paris Fashion Week that sell fur. All 3 other board members are associated with LVMH companies. And for those that don't know, LVMH is kind of our big long-term campaign we've been having going on for about 3-4 years now. But yeah, so Rick Owens on the board of Paris Fashion Week, a huge deal in the fashion community. Another metric that we've been looking at for them is like how many times these people are talked about in the big fashion magazines. And when you look at Rick Owens, like how many times he's mentioned in something like Business of Fashion, it's like 6,000 times. Is where when you look at like the next designer below that, for instance, like say something like Woolrich or Chiton, they're less than 100 times mentioned in Business of Fashion. And this is kind of like a rudimentary metric that CAFT's been using for a while to be able to get like a rough idea of like how relevant the fashion designers are and how influential they are, because, you know, it's not rocket science to understand that if they're mentioned 5 times in a magazine, they're probably less important than if they're mentioned 6,000 times. And Rick Owens is an outlier with the last designers that are still selling fur in terms of like, he is significant. He's mentioned significantly more in all the publications. He has positions in the fashion weeks that are strategic for us to move forward. And right now he's only got one piece of fur. And I'll tell you what, if I was Rick Owens, I would not want these activists showing up outside of his stores, outside of his, you know, employees' homes to keep the single piece of fur that he has online right now. So, so yeah, we're feeling good about it. Really excited. You know, you never really know what's going to happen when you launch a new campaign. It could be over in a week, could be over in a year, but either way, you know, whenever we launch a campaign, we try to make sure it's a campaign that we could stand behind for a long period of time. You know what I mean? We're not going to launch a campaign if we're not willing to dedicate years of our lives to winning it, because we believe it's important. You know, I mean, that's been like a constant trend with everything from, you know, Marc Jacobs to Vogue to New York Fashion Week. Like, if these companies wanted to hold out, we would stick it through, because we're only going after companies that are important to the industry. And for that reason, like, yeah, we're really excited about Rick.
And how can people get involved in this campaign? I know you've got a few campaigns sort of running simultaneously. And for those that heard Tyler mention LVMH, that's the Louis Vuitton Moet Hennessy brand that owns several different, or it's an umbrella that owns several different fashion brands like Fendi, who's still selling for some that Tyler was talking about earlier, and others. But can you talk about all the campaigns that are currently going on right now and how people can get involved, even if they don't have a great target in their city? Maybe they could get involved in the campaign, or maybe they could do something different. I'd like to know what advice you have for those people as well. That was one of the questions in the comments.
I can take this. I mean, there's many different ways to get involved. You know, if you sign up to our mailing list, usually we'll, you know, I'll send an email with like different opportunities. You know, sometimes there's a lot of needs that CAFT has. You know, it's not just, you know, protesting, you know, from video editing to research help, or, you know, just with digital actions. Getting on our mailing list is definitely the way to start. If there's like an urgent call to action, I'll send out an email like, hey, like we need people to leave comments on this Instagram post, things like that. We also help some cities with their local campaigns. So if you're interested in, you know, starting a small local campaign, if you don't have like an LVMH brand or, you know, a Rick Owens store in your city, reach out to us. I can put my, maybe I'll give you my email so you can put it in the chat. It's just Susie@caftusa.org. Just send me an email. We can set up a call. We're more than happy to meet with people. We also have a campaigns coordinator, Jay, who is in constant communication with activists from around the country. Yeah, so just reach out. There's always something to do.
And Susie, you had a funny little story you wanted to tell.
Oh, yes, about Rick Owens. So, you know, we already knew after Hearst, we're more than likely going to focus on Rick Owens. And we actually launched the campaign a little early because 2 of our team members managed to track down a Rick Owens designer. His name is Tyrone Dillon. At the airport, and basically let him know, hey, just so you know, CAFT is, you know, launching a campaign against Rick Owens. Like, how can we reach out? So he gave an email. It was just like a press email, but it was pretty funny that we're already getting face to face with these people. So this is someone who's very close and personal with Rick Owens. So it's great that we were able to speak with them and let them know that, hey, this is coming.
That's awesome. I know people who volunteer with CAFT and people on CAFT's staff, they have eagle eyes. I remember the New York Convergence a couple years ago when activists were going after Mark Jacobs. I'm blanking on the guy's name now because there's been so many campaigns since then, but I think it was Mark Jacobs' publicist or somebody like that walking down the street. I think the activists were like on their way to a protest or on the way from a protest, and everybody saw the guy and just started like confronting him. There's probably like 70 people just confronting him on the street. So, hey, if you're working for a company that still sells fur or has anything to do with fur, this is what you're up against, and CAFT always wins. So that's that, I guess. But yeah. So how can people did I ask this already, how people can get involved even if they don't have like a target in their city? I know Fendi, Berluti, Laura Piana, and then correct me if I'm wrong, but the top target is going to be Rick Owens.
Yes, yes, it is. You can always reach out to CAFT action@caftusa.org. I think Susie mentioned it earlier. If you're doing a local campaign, we actually would love to help with that. It's a personal goal of mine to try and see people waste as little time as possible. And I think sometimes when you're just getting into campaigning, some things are just really obvious at a quick glance. So like we would love to be like a resource to people if people just want to like chat for an hour about their local campaigns. But also with the Rick Owens campaign, we can't actually say what they are currently, but there are going to be a lot of options for secondary targets with Rick Owens, which we're not going to announce who those are yet. We'll do that soon. But as I'm looking at how many targets we have, I'm looking at 134 targets around the globe. And most of those are targets that are protestable. And they're all over the place in places that we don't always see. There's even one in Charlotte, Trey. but yeah, so yeah, reach out to CAFT through action@caftusa.org. But also, I think the Rick Owens campaign has a lot of room for people to do on-the-ground actions with some secondaries that really matter. So yeah.
I'm so sorry that we weren't able to get to all the questions in the chat, and I don't want to keep y'all too much longer. I know you all are working hard on these campaigns, even late at night sometimes. So I don't want to keep you for too long. But I do want to ask if y'all have any final words just to share with the viewers who have all been hanging in here for well over an hour and a half now. Really appreciate everybody tuning in and wanting to learn more, and also just to celebrate these two victories that just happened. It's cool to just kind of like be on a live stream and like do something to sort of celebrate and also learn a lot about how these wins were achieved and everything like that. So thank you to everybody who's tuned in, but don't go away yet because we have some exciting announcements at the end, and also I want to get some final words from Susie and Tyler. So Susie, anything that was left unsaid that you want to say, and maybe we can give a little inspirational, a little bit of an inspirational word to those who are working on these anti-fur campaigns.
I mean, I'm just so incredibly grateful for everybody in this community, everybody that gives up their time, their weekends, their lunch breaks to come out, and everyone that trusts us with these campaigns. We wouldn't be where we are right now if it wasn't for this amazing community and this group of people who come out and continue again and again to advocate for these animals. I'm just really inspired by everyone, really. And every convergence, I mean, Fur Free Weekend was great. It was so wholesome. I loved getting to know everybody and protesting with everyone. One of my favorite things, and one of my favorite things about these convergences too, is seeing people do speak outs for the first time, lead chants for the first time, and you could see, you could see it in their faces that this is something that, I don't know, that's really important to them. So yeah, I just want to say thank you to everybody, and especially AAC.
Oh, AAC is so honored to work alongside CAFT. Yeah, it's been a beautiful partnership, and congratulations on everything you've achieved. We're happy to be a part of it. Tyler.
Yeah, some final thoughts. I guess for me, it's stay optimistic. You know what I mean? I've had a lot of my time as an activist not thinking that animal liberation was possible, not thinking that abolishing the fur trade was possible. And frankly, like when CAFT USA started, I don't think I even believed it then. I think it was just, hey, like, we think we can beat these brands, and let's come up with a plan for what makes sense to us to tackle this industry, and let's just start moving forward with it. And the more we've moved forward, the more inspired I've been to actually be a little bit more optimistic. And to me, a big part of how I've done that and how I've seen other people do it, and how I hope people that are listening do it, is as sad and depressing as it is to what's going on inside of fur farms, inside of factory farms to these animals, your tears and sadness don't do the animals any favors. Don't let these industries, don't get sad, get angry. Get out there on the streets and do something about it, and spend your time doing things that actually make a difference. Obviously, the people listening to this podcast, a lot of them are already doing that. But just change is possible, and that's been a big shift I've drastically shifted my opinion over the past 5 years on that. And we are making a difference, and it's only possible when we work together. So keep getting out there on the streets and fuck shit up, make it happen. I'm not supposed to cuss. I'm not supposed to do that.
That's fine. Maybe we should say that he means that in the figurative sense.
Yes.
All right. Well, don't go anywhere. Thank you so much, Susie and Tyler, for joining us. I just want to give a couple of quick announcements before we go. First of all, tomorrow night at 6 p.m., we have yet another live stream. It's going to be a good one. Josh Balk will be joining us to discuss the Dangerous Eats Act. It's legislation in Congress that, if passed, would wipe out farmed animal protection laws across the country and prevent impactful new laws from passing in the future. The EATS Act is primarily backed by the National Pork Producers Council and the Farm Bureau and their powerful allies in Congress, and it'll take all of us fighting back to defeat it. So on tomorrow's live stream at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, you'll learn more about the massive threat that we're facing as a movement and how you can take action. That'll be streaming right here on Animal Activism Collective's YouTube channel. Also, if you have not registered yet, we just got done talking about how to get involved in a CAFT campaign. Well, it's coming up fast. AAC's Los Angeles Convergence. It's January 23rd through February 1st of 2026. Come be a part of our community. Come learn. If you've never led a chance, come lead chance. If you've never chalked, come chalk. If you've never leafleted, come leaflet. We're going to be doing some CAFT campaigns. Who knows which ones, because maybe some will be won by then. Who knows at this rate? But we do know we're going to be working on some anti-fur campaigns out in Los Angeles, as well as some other campaigns as well that we're all going to work together on. So it's going to be really exciting. So if you haven't registered yet, I'm going to put AAC's link tree in the comments, and you can click there to not only learn about how to register for these events, but also everything we've got coming up. You can sign up for our newsletter, donate, and all of those things. And I also included earlier CAFT's newsletter, which I'm going to copy and paste one more time. If you want to sign up for CAFT's newsletter, which I highly recommend that you do, to stay in the know about everything that's going on with CAFT. Also, we'd love it if you liked this video, shared it with another anti-fur activist, or shared it with another activist who you think might be interested in pressure campaigns, to let them know And then it'd be great if you subscribe. That really helps us out, helps more people see our content and get inspired to take action for the animals. If you didn't know about AAC's mentorship program, you can go to animalactivismcollective.com and you can sign up for a mentor. It's somebody who will cater specifically to you and the kind of activism that you want to do. Maybe you watch this live stream and you're like, hey, getting out on the street and protesting, that's exactly what I want to do. Somebody will help you with that. If you're like, that's not really at all what I want to do, somebody will help you with that. Maybe you've got a special skill and you don't know how to apply that to being an animal rights activist. A mentor can help you with that. So I would strongly encourage you to sign up for a mentor at animalactivismcollective.com. We'll get you plugged into a campaign, plugged into your local community, or help you start a local community, whatever it takes to get you active for animals in the most effective way possible. We'll help you out with that. So I encourage you to sign up. You can also get to that through the link tree that's in the comments. We also have a podcast called the Animal Liberation Hour. We've just had a few episodes drop, so I hope that you will check those out. And I'm going to shut up now and let Tyler and Susie go. I really appreciate everybody tuning in and checking this out and having fun and celebrating this victory. And here's to the next win. I'm sure it'll come soon. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining, and we will see you next time. Take care. Be safe.